Hi, this is Nathan Hall, and I'm going to go over my code for the smart doorbell assignment. So overall, there's many things that from the class lectures that worked for my smart doorbell detection, and but there was also a few minor changes along the way. So first, to go over my setup, I have my Raspberry Pi camera and rig right here, and it's facing down the alleyway of my room. So to go over how I went about this process, first I used a 640 times 480 image to reduce processing speed, and I didn't need the image to be that much bigger since it's kind of looking down an alleyway of my room. And so here's the picture that you get from my Raspberry Pi. So it gives a nice view of my room and clearly shows the doorway. So no one could essentially get in and out, or out of my room without setting this detector off, but it also shows what they did after originally entering or exiting my room. And so some other things to go through my code. So for my mask, here's my mask right here. I basically took a slice of right where the door alleyway begins and a little bit into my room. Ideally, I want to make this skinnier, but I had to make it wider. There was a trade-off between how much of my room I wanted to show, because ideally I would only want to show someone definitively going into my room and not like maybe walking across the area in my room. But I also had to take into account the time delay between images being taken, and someone could easily walk past my door if it was too skinny with if this mask was too thin and they just wouldn't be detected by it. So that was my mask for it. And so going further into my code, one of the main changes, some of the changes I made, obviously, like I said, I changed it from the 640 480 for my image size. I also changed the time to zero point 0.5 seconds, as again, since my mask is still kind of small, I want these images to be taken very quickly, one after the other, so it could detect something moving quickly across this small mask frame. Another key change that I made to the code is I took the brightness of the overall test image one, and there's a reason that I did this. So I basically want to adjust the pixel threshold based on the brightness of the overall room. So if the brightness is essentially this, a normal um, brightness setting, one could say, then I want to use the pixel threshold of 50 as that was working well as I was testing my code. But some things that I came across is if my room's very dark, then I want this pixel threshold to be lowered because I want it to be easier to, I want it to be able to still detect stuff even in darker settings. And then finally, I have a unique setting right here. I call it the kind of like dim setting. So the brightness is like above 20 or less than 100. Essentially, what I was running into is if my room is dark, but I have light coming in from the main area into my room and it's hitting the door, there's a very stark contrast when I walk in front of my door as the rest of my room is dark. So there's not really any light coming off of me. So if I enter this area, then it's very sensitive to the changes. And one thing that I was running into is the threshold total was like enormous. If I didn't raise the pixel threshold to about 100 and still be able, so this way it's not too high. And the reason I don't want it to be too high is one thing that I was noticing, another change I made here for the detector total. To start, I have a pretty small threshold in terms of detecting as it's in my room. There's not much movement or noise. And overall, I'm still able to walk through the alleyway of my room without setting off the mask. But I also have a upper limit on this detective total, as one thing I was realizing is turning on or off the lights leads to a very high number, and I don't want this to send an email to me every time my lights are turned on and off. So essentially, I have a upper threshold for it so that it that much of a stark change just isn't someone entering my room essentially. And I think overall, that's pretty much the process of what I changed in the code. And the rest was just worked pretty smoothly for my projects. So yeah, next I'll show some of this actually being played out. So first I'm going to show the basic functionality in that I'm able to essentially perform most of my normal operations in my room without setting off the Ring doorbell sensor unless I'm actually going through the door. So I'm able to do everything over here and essentially not interfere with my sensor and not set it off. So then the next part that I'm gonna showcase. So as you can see right now, the pixel threshold is about 50 because the brightness in my room is high. So if I basically right now it detects when I'm walking in or out of my door. But if I turn these lights off, but I have light coming in from the main area, the pixel threshold is changed to 100 and still is able to detect when I'm moving in or out of my door. And then finally, when this light's off and my room's dark, it is still able to, the pixel threshold changes to 20 and it's still able to detect me going in or out of my door. So another thing that I noticed from my code, and I'll have to see that if I can align it correctly, but if the light is turned on and off very suddenly, see like 805,000, it doesn't detect anything because that's just my light being turned on and off. So that's another essential function of my code. So one thing that I was looking at when I was actually looking at some of the previous testing that I just showed is the number. I also just wanted to show the functionality of my code is that it even shows when I turn on this main area light as it switches to 872,000 right there. So that's just another example of, well, if a light's turned on and off, that doesn't mean there's movement at my door. It's just the light itself. So I don't want to detect that. But I did also notice at one point in my code that the number, at one point in my part of the code, the number seemed to be about like 400,000, and although this is a rare case, it kind of showed me that instead of having this number right here as 300,000, I could probably get away with making this 500,000. So that's the change I'm going to make to my code to make it final right now, and that because most of the time turning on the light was well above 500,000. So just in case there is a higher number for the detector total when someone's walking, I just want to be on the safe side of someone entering and exiting my room by making this 500,000. So now I'm going to show the full functionality of my smart doorbell with all the code uncommented to show that it sends an email and uploads to my Dropbox. So here you can see it's not detecting anything, but as soon as I walk through my door, it's going to detect something, and eventually it's going to then take a video of me walking into my room, convert the file, upload it to my Dropbox, and then finally deliver email to me. So now we'll go first to our email. And this is using the fake email that I created and I sent it to my personal email. And here is the email that I sent with this email. So here's the first image. And then quickly after, it simply recognizes me beginning to walk in my room. And that's enough for the threshold to be set off. and it shows the grayscale, and then the mask of me entering my room. And then finally, in my Dropbox, after I refresh this page, there's now an item in my app folder in my Dropbox. And if we go to all files, go to we get through here, go to this app, and finally here's the video. And this video will show me walking into my room as the text, and then of course it continues taking the 15-second long video. So yeah, that shows the basic functionality of my code fully working. And next I'll go over some improvements that I think could still be made to this code. So finally, I just want to go over some quick improvements that I think could improve my smart doorbell setup. So to start, I think software and hardware wise, I think to start is that the processing speed or the processing power a higher processing power would definitely be beneficial to this project, as there's a time delay naturally as it runs through the code between after it takes the first and second image before it takes the first and second image again. It's constantly cycling through, but there are moments, especially with my small area of detection, that in very rare cases, someone could maybe be slip by that mask without being detected. Now, that would be very rare, but another thing I could do would be to widen the mask, but that would be also lead to it detecting me moving around my room more. So there'd be kind of pros and cons to each of those, but overall, I think increasing the processing power um, would be beneficial. Another thing that I think could be beneficial would be possibly introducing infrared light, because although I have a brightness change, if there's no light at all and it's basically pitch black, then it's going to have a hard time. If there's no light at all, then it's going to need some other way to detect someone walking by the door. And another thing that could be used would be maybe a LiDAR sensor, like if there was a laser without set up in my room, just aiming at that door. No one could walk across my door without coming across this laser. And then through distance measurements, if it realizes that something's closer after because of something walking through the laser, um, then it would be able to detect the user that way. And this would also help minimize any noise with the camera. And finally, I think something hardware wise, in terms of the location of the hardware, one idea that I had would be to set the Ring doorbell set up right above my door so it's looking down. And so that way you could essentially make the mask much bigger, and you could, yeah, the mask would be much bigger, and that would get rid of the risk of someone passing by the mask in the time that it may not be detecting, so that it would be guaranteed to detect someone walking in or out of your room. And it would also lead to that none of the alleyway essentially, um, I could move in any part of my room right against that wall up to the door, so that it wouldn't detect anything strictly other than someone walking through the doorway if it's placed directly above the door. But then again, you wouldn't be able to take a video of what was going on in your whole room, unless, of course, you could have two setups, with one detecting right above the door with detecting motion, and then I could have a ring like in the corner of my room showing a whole view of my room, and those two could work together in a sense that it would be guaranteed that you would detect motion and also guaranteed that you get a full view of everything that's going on in your room before and after. So yeah, that with those improvements, those various improvements that could be explored, I think this setup could be improved.